The rise of political violence and intimidation is a crucial issue, even for us here in our relatively benign democracy. As you know, we've seen violent political protests here over the years, whether the issue was Vietnam or uranium mining or the early antipathy towards the Howard government with those horrible Parliament House riots. But thankfully, political violence here has never reached the levels seen in other countries like the United States, especially when it comes to targeted attacks against specific individuals. Yet we can't afford to be the slightest bit complacent, especially after the Bondi massacre, the worst act of terrorism in this nation's history, when 15 people were killed just 8 months ago in what police allege was an act of Islamist extremist terrorism. We must be ever vigilant here. And that's why I want to mention what I saw in Melbourne yesterday when I was following Pauline Hanson across a couple of events. When Hanson announced a clutch of new One Nation candidates at a CBD hotel in the morning, the security was overwhelming. Teams of armed police patrolled around the streets outside, and dozens more officers were inside the hotel patrolling the ground floor while the event was being held upstairs. Now, I've been around media and politics for 40 years, and I've seen plenty of incidents and protests and security from all angles. This was an exceptional array of security. It tells me the police in Victoria are operating under the advice of intelligence that details a significant threat. Now, I remember covering Hanson events in the late 1990s, when there were more protesters outside some of her venues than sometimes there were supporters inside. And on occasions, these protests descended into violence back then. That wasn't good, of course, but I'm more worried now. One Nation has become a potent political force across the nation. And late yesterday, I went to Pauline Hanson's second event, a fundraiser at a hotel in Melbourne's Hawthorn. This area was surrounded by police. 2 roads were blocked with traffic diverted right around the hotel. Protesters targeted One Nation and, of course, the people attending. Yeah, and of course the main focus of their vitriol was the One Nation leader herself. This was ugly, and thankfully there was no violence, no arrests, and no one was hurt. But a lot of people were inconvenienced, a lot of people were intimidated, and a lot of police resources were diverted from fighting crime. And in the end, this is a pretty puerile political push. I mean, have a listen to this. Yeah, these protesters are uniting to fight the right. They are the hard left, the feral left, if you like, and their main issue is just to fight the right, as if being right of centre, as if believing in small government, free enterprise, strong borders and personal responsibility, as if these things are something to protest against or to fight, as they say. So this is worrying enough, but my concern here is that the threats against Hanson and One Nation are even more serious because the police presence and posture was so robust, and this suggests that they might be worried about more than mere protesters. And this could be a major issue for this country. With Victoria effectively in campaign mode already and the New South Wales election happening early next year, and then the focus, of course, will switch to the looming federal election by then, how are we going to ensure that all politicians can campaign freely? Will One Nation have to campaign the whole time from behind a force field of security? If so, what will that mean for the other parties? And more to the point, what does that mean for our democracy and our way of life? Now, peaceful protests, of course, are a crucial part of democracy, and violence, of course, is beyond the pale. But so too is intimidation. Intimidation that can curtail free political debate. We need to watch this space very
Quick
carefully.
favour. If you are the kind of person who loves Australia and wants to stay up to date on what is going on in our country's politics, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. It helps us keep this channel going. Over 90% of viewers have not yet, and it would mean the world to us if you did. Thank you. Now, back to the show. Australia is supposed to be the country where politics is argued with words, not weapons. That's the whole point of the place. So what does it say when a politician cannot walk into a hotel to announce a candidate without armed officers on the street, dozens of police in the lobby, and an intelligence assessment screaming that the threat is real? It says something has changed, and not for the better. This is not about one party. It's about the slow, ugly creep of political intimidation, and it didn't start this month. Cast your mind back to the Bondi massacre, the attack that made every Australian flinch, an act of ideologically driven violence that reminded us, in the worst possible way, that we are not immune. 8 months on, that memory is now baked into how events are policed, and nobody is more aware of it than the security teams around One Nation. Now watch what happened in Melbourne. At a candidate announcement in a city hotel, the scene was extraordinary. Armed police patrolling the footpath outside, dozens more inside on the ground floor, while the actual event ran upstairs. That's not a normal police presence. That's the kind of posture you see when intelligence says a significant threat is on the table. Then came the Hawthorn fundraiser. 2 roads shut, traffic diverted, and a crowd of protesters gathered not to debate, but to target one woman, Pauline Hanson, personally. No arrests, no violence, but the intimidation was loud enough for the whole country to hear. And here's the thing that should worry every voter, regardless of who you support. Back in the late 90s, Hanson events drew massive, sometimes violent protests, and yet the security was a fraction of what we are seeing today. One Nation's influence has grown, and so has the machinery built to protect it. That is not a healthy democracy. It is a sign that the threats have moved past protest and into something far more premeditated. Real quick, if you are getting value from this, do not forget to like and subscribe. It genuinely helps us keep covering these stories. Now ask yourself the uncomfortable question. If a party is forced to campaign inside a force field, can it campaign freely at all? And what precedent does that set for everyone else? Here's the cold truth. Intimidation doesn't need to draw blood to do its damage. It silences voices. It scares away volunteers. It drags police resources away from ordinary crime prevention and pours them into guarding politics instead. The chilling of dissent doesn't happen with a gun. It happens with a crowd, a threat, a closed road, and a politician who thinks twice before booking the next venue. Democracy is only as strong as the number of people willing to stand in a room and disagree without fear. The moment that fear wins, the ballot box is already compromised before a single vote is cast. So no, this is not a One Nation problem. This is an Australian problem, and it deserves our full attention. That's the story this week. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next